Hi, I'm James, and today I have another ASUS Vivobook on the desk. Now here in the UK this is branded as the ASUS Vivobook 14 R465EA, but even on the palm rest sticker here we can find that this is the ASUS X415. So ASUS have a bit of a habit branding their machines differently in different regions, and for whatever reason they have given this a completely different model number here in the UK. But for the sake of this review, I would say both of these machines are equivalent to each other, and in fact, going by the BIOS and other information, are the same. In terms of design and features, this particular model is really one of the more budget offerings from ASUS. It is available with a range of processors from the Pentium Gold 7505 all the way up to an 11th gen Core i7. However, in this particular machine we have a Core i3 1115G4 paired with 4GB of DDR4 memory and 128GB M2 NVMe PCIe 3.0 SSD. Looking at the basic design of the laptop, and it's safe to say this is less sleek than ASUS's ZenBook range, obviously as you'd expect from a lower price point machine. Things that I would draw attention to are that the bezel around the screen is certainly not the thinnest that we've seen, particularly at the top. There is a fairly thick bezel here, and at the bottom they have not done a huge amount to slim that down. Elsewhere, the machine is not especially thin or light for a 14-inch laptop, coming in at 19.9mm thick, but ignoring the feet, so it sits almost sort of 23mm off the desk when it is actually placed there, and around 1.6 kilograms or around 3.5 pounds. Looking around the machine, we have a silver lid with ASUS logo in a shiny finish, whereas it's more matte for the rest of the lid. Whilst on the back we have a darker contrasting grey finish to the base, which is in a more textured plastic. Screw holes are exposed on this model, and we have the heatsink visible here through quite wide grates, and weirdly the air intake right on the other side of the laptop. We have kind of aesthetic, mostly vents on the back where there is grooved sort of plastic in the back of this base panel, but just two small holes into it here and here. The speakers fire downwards out of the front section of the base here, and unfortunately ASUS do not give us an output rating for these. Looking at ports, and on the left hand side we will see we have our power in, USB-C, HDMI and USB Type A. Breaking down these ports further, and the USB-C port is USB 3.2 Gen 1, and this does not support, I believe, the USB power delivery or display port, so it can be used for peripherals but isn't useful for charging the laptop or outputting video. Likewise, the USB-A port is USB 3.2 Gen 1, so as with this, limited to 5 gigabits per second. Additionally, the HDMI port is HDMI 1.4, not HDMI 2, so you don't get support for anything like 4K 60Hz output, which is rather disappointing. Turning to the other side, and we can see that we have our Kensington lock connector, a pair of USB 2 ports, so not USB 3 on this right hand side, headphone jack, and micro SD card reader. Now personally I would really like to see USB 3.2 Gen 1 at least on this side, and I personally again find a full-size SD card reader more useful because I use cameras with high-speed full-size SD cards, but this isn't the end of the world. Certainly for the price of laptop I can see why you'd go with micro SD, as that is more commonly found in phone storage and so on. You also have a power indicator, we can see this is flickering as the laptop is asleep at the moment, and a battery charging indicator. The palm rest assembly shares the same silver finish as the lid of the machine, and you get these contrasting keys which have a darker grey akin to the base. Numbers and letters are clear, marked in white on grey, so a lot of contrast there, but the keyboard itself isn't backlit on this model. The keyboard itself is a chiclet design with around 1.4mm of travel on the keys, and overall the feel of the keys is pretty good. As with the last Vivobook I looked at as well, we have the handy function lock option here, so we can toggle these F keys between being function keys, so F1, F2, or toggling it off. We can go back to hotkey priority where we can mute, adjust voltage, brightness, and so on. That's quite nice, as I prefer to have these set to the function keys generally, and on a lot of machines that means going into the BIOS to change the default. But on here, having that nice toggle is quite a good compromise. One thing that is clearly lacking, however, is we have no fingerprint sensor built in on this model anywhere on the palm rest or keyboard, and combined with the lack of a Windows Hello compatible webcam means we have to rely on password or PIN to log in for most users, unless you want to use something like a Bluetooth device or similar. Also notable is this touchpad, although actually fine to use, is quite small for this size of machine. It comes in at 10 centimeters wide and 6 centimeters tall, and feels quite cramped to me. The Dell Inspiron 14 2-in-1 that I use has an extra centimetre of height and width in what is actually a slightly smaller chassis, and so this feels quite small. It's not a major concern, but moving between the machines it was noticeable that this is more compact. The display, while perhaps not having the thinnest bezels that you might find, does at least have a good quality panel in it. We have a 14-inch diagonal, and this is a 1080p 45% NTSC colour gamut and 250 nits brightness panel. Typically at this price point you may find a lower brightness 220 nits panel, or worse yet a TN or WVA type panel, so this should give better colour accuracy and wider viewing angles than a lot of laptops at its price point. Another disappointing aspect is that ASUS have spec'd the machine with a VGA webcam, so 0.3 megapixels, a 640x480 resolution, and 30 frames per second. And as you can see, it doesn't look great. You're going to not have a huge amount of detail, a fairly fuzzy image. The microphone, however, is acceptable, for classroom Zoom use or occasional, work conferences. It's not going to be an issue. But if this is your primary way of communicating with people, particularly at the moment, if be they abroad or local, you're not going to get a great image from this if that is a concern for you. Connecting the system up to our capture card and taking a look at the specifications for it. And as we would expect, we can see it confirms that we have our Core i3 1115G4 processor with 4GB of RAM. We also have Windows 10 Home. This was initially in S mode, however I have unlocked this in the Windows Store for free to the full version of Windows 10 Home so I can run other applications. This ships with the 20H2 build of Windows 10, however it is eligible for a Windows 11 upgrade, as when we look in the Windows Security section, Performance and Health, Device Security, we can see that we have the necessary TPM 2.0 support, and this is a supported processor as well, being Core i3 11th generation. Taking a look in CPU Z, and again this confirms the Core i3 11th generation, we can see that even though this was sold as a R465EA, it is actually a X415EA. Our memory is a single DIMM, and it's actually not a DIMM module, it is soldered to the mainboard. However, there is a DIMM slot inside the machine, and if you look on our channel we will shortly be doing an upgrade guide for the memory and SSD as well. And so this is running in single channel memory mode, and we can see here we have the empty slot as well. Graphics is Intel UHD, as this is the i3 model which does not get Iris Xe. Crystal Disk Info tells us that this is a 4CP900 128GB SSD. It doesn't give us the interface width, but I believe it is a PCIe 2x device. And Crystal Diskmark shows that while we have a reasonable 1225 megabyte per second read speed, being 128 gig SSD and presumably DRAMless, the write speed is really pretty poor at 130 megabytes a second. So disappointing from that. As it is, this machine is actually going to be getting an upgrade to 8 gigs of RAM and a 256GB SSD. So that isn't really a concern for me, but it was something that I just wanted to bring up on this. For basic use, this isn't going to be an issue. It at least reacts quickly because you have the low latency of the SSD, but it is a bit disappointing that you have those write speeds if you're using it for any sort of productive use. But for your general, web browsing, email, media consumption, it's not going to be a major problem. Looking at thermals, and we can see here the laptop is idling around 45 degrees, and if we are to run the multi-threaded benchmark in Cinebench, we will see that power climbs to the 20 watt during the sort of shorter term turbo boost, and once the test begins running properly, we will see temperatures rapidly climb up to around, I saw a maximum of, I believe, 94 degrees. And then as the test runs for longer and this package temperature drops down to 15 watts after the initial phase of the higher power draw for max turbo, this then will bring temperatures down to around 80 degrees. The laptop doesn't get especially loud, the volume of the fan does increase, but not to extremely high levels, and that at least is one of the benefits of the slightly thicker base, where it perhaps is better equipped for airflow than some systems. So thermal performance, it does obviously heat up. I did not find the base of the laptop getting especially hot. It is plastic rather than metal, so that does help in that regard. Also looking here, we see that the battery is a 37 watt hour battery, and ASUS rate this at 4 to 5 hours of battery life. When I have been working with the machine today, I've seen Windows estimating sort of 3.5 to 4 hours. I imagine with sort of very light usage, you might see 4, and if you use it in the really power save modes, you could get to 5, but it is quite a small battery, and that isn't the most impressive result, to be honest. So overall, what do we think of the ASUS Vivobook X415EA, or as it is here in the UK, the R465EA? Well, first of all, at under £300 for 11th gen Core i3 and IPS screen, this really represents pretty good value. The construction of the machine is certainly reasonable, and at the price point, there isn't much to complain about here. The fact that both the SSD and RAM are easily upgradable, so this machine could be taken to an 8GB memory configuration for around an additional £20, is also a definite bonus, and if you need more storage space, that can be swapped as well. Not something that matters to all people, but something to bear in mind. A year of Microsoft 365 Personal is also included, and particularly the OneDrive with the ability to store files off the machine and fetch them as required may help with that relative lack of storage space. Less positive is ASUS's choice of SSD for this laptop. Whilst it is an NVMe type drive, the really poor write speeds are disappointing. For general use, this won't be a massive concern, but it really is subpar even compared to SATA type drives, and for an NVMe they really should be doing better. Additionally, while it is nice to have that USB-C port, the lack of power delivery or DisplayPort through it really does limit how useful it is. The lack of keyboard backlighting or a fingerprint reader is also disappointing, although perhaps not unexpected at the price. Having only 4GB of RAM and 128GB SSD is definitely going to be limiting for some users, and whilst it can be upgraded, that obviously isn't something you want to necessarily be doing with a brand new system. And finally, having USB 2 ports on the right hand side of the machine is just an odd choice. It means you have to think about what's being plugged in. If you're attaching a USB stick, you always want to make sure you're doing that on the left hand side. It would have been nice to see those throughout. So overall, I think this is really a nice laptop at the price point. There are some things to sort of caveat its recommendation, but really it would be hard to say that at this price point it's not a good machine. So lastly, I'd just like to say thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Hit like if you found this video helpful, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of our videos in the future. Thanks for watching.